Hello, everyone. My name is Clay R. Fuller. I was previously at the American Enterprise Institute, where I wrote a report on dismantling the authoritarian corruption nexus. I'm an adjunct professor of political science at Western Carolina University, and I'm currently a research affiliate with the Walker Institute at the University of South Carolina. You can find out more about my research and other works here at my personal website, www.clayrfuller.com. So for today, for British or United Kingdom freeports and zones, I have basically four key takeaways that I want to put forth here before our discussion. Um, with the World Trade Organization forecasting that global trade is going to decline between 13 and 32% this year, while at the same time the World Health Organization is adamantly saying that global trade needs to remain open and functioning in order to get the equipment, the medical equipment and supplies around the world that we need in order to combat the global coronavirus pandemic. Freeports, foreign trade zones, special economic zones, free trade zones are at every node of global supply chains in that network, and so they are of critical importance now. They were very important before the pandemic, and now they're of critical importance in my view. Second, risk in any of these zones is a function of what's already going on in the domestic environment. So what RUSI has done here is look at the risks in the UK, but in their other work on evaluating transparency and creating a methodological tool for doing that, they're looking at evaluating other zones around the world, and a lot of that has to do with what's going on in the domestic environment of a country. Their third point, more studies and more data are needed in this area of free ports and special economic zones, free trade zones, foreign trade zones. More studies by independent academics, independent academic institutions, policy institutions, etc., is needed so that we can understand these important tools. And fourth point, missing data is data. We need to start collecting it. Whenever a data point is missing, that means something, and typically something important. And in my view, I think in this case, it's somewhat of a red flag. So why are these zones so important? Well, they've proliferated in number very rapidly. So in 1975, there were estimated 79 of these special economic zones, free ports, foreign trade zones, whatever your name for them is. But then by 2018, there's close to 5,400. And in the past 20 years, this has increased from 845 approximately to this 5,400 number. So they've gone up very substantially, very fast, and spread. I'll talk a little bit more about where they've spread, but looking at 29 countries in 1975 to 147 countries in 2018. And any country that doesn't have a type of zone program or Freeport program has them in the plans, and they're planning on bringing them on board. So these are going to be around for a while. So thinking about the UK zones, is there potentially a dark side? Perhaps, of course, because freeports and zones are connected to the rest of the world, and there are dark spots around the world. Where economic malfeasance happens. So you're going to have some type of problems, but this is why we're going through these exercises to learn how to mitigate for them and correct. So getting to the number of them that have proliferated around the world, you look at the developed economies with approximately 5,400 around the world. 374 are in developed economies compared to 4,700 in developing economies. So getting to how these types of free ports, special economic zones, foreign trade zones are sort of amplifiers for the domestic economy. Developing economies tend to be more manufacturing, export-oriented economies. So therefore, they have a lot more of these sort of special economic zone, free trade zone type programs. Developed economies oftentimes tend to be more service-oriented economies. And so that's reflected in the types of zones that they create, tending to have more of logistics-oriented zones, such as free ports. And technology hubs and other things like that. But so getting to evaluating risk about zones and whether or not the UK free ports are risky or not, you can look at different indicators. I pulled up the World Justice Project Rule of Law Index here, which I can talk about more. But the United Kingdom ranks very high up in this index, along very close to where Singapore and Hong Kong rank, and actually much higher than the United States. Now I bring that up because Singapore and Hong Kong are both essentially free ports, the entire place. And the United States, which ranks 21st on the index, and the UK, I believe, ranks 12th or 13th. In the United States, we have over 200 foreign trade zones, and they are considered to be some of the best operating, lowest risk in the world. So you get to the bottom of the Rule of Law Index, and you see places like Venezuela or Myanmar, where in Venezuela you have a free port on the island of Margarita, which that free port is known as a way station for Colombian drug lords bringing cocaine to Europe. And you see the sort of connection between what's going on in the domestic economy and politics gets amplified by whatever type of zone is there in the country. So for the threat of illicit trade, finance, yes, of course, it's a threat. If you take the amount of illicit trade and finance going on around the world in a year and you counted that as a national economy, illicit trade and finance would be one of the top 10 national economies in the world. We're talking about trillions of dollars. So it's a threat in everything and anything we do, but that shouldn't scare us away from developing things like free ports and zone programs. Because that's why we're going through this whole exercise, is to learn how to mitigate that risk while enjoying the benefits. So the first thing I would suggest doing is reading the RUSI briefing paper, and also paying attention for its transparency tool when it comes out. Look at the OECD Code of Conduct for Clean Trade Zones. I call these the SOPs for FTZs. Which are very, very helpful. I also suggest looking at the use of blockchain distributed ledgers to counter trade-based money laundering, which you can look at. U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy has written a white paper on this and has talked about it extensively. There are also other innovative tools, such as the GFI trade tool from Global Financial Integrity, a group in the United States, who collects data on different prices all around the world and allows customs agencies to quickly access and compare prices around the world to look for anomalies, for misinvoicing, overinvoicing. I also suggest better signage, typically, not necessarily fences and guards, but billboards and signs just letting people know where these zones are and that they're there. I think this would do wonders for advertising, for letting people know what these things do, and elevating the reputation of these places. Also, I think we need to identify all the world's zones and free ports and put them in a publicly accessible global database, and encourage all of these zone operators to report aggregate statistics to such a database on number of jobs, number of crates in and out, number of firms, et cetera, in the aggregate, to make sure that it protects the privacy and the trade secrets of the private firms. I also suggest getting creative with zones, leveraging our comparative advantage. We're service economies, so maybe we need to start looking into how services can be exported through zones. So happy to answer any questions, and thanks again for having me, and looking forward to the discussion.